The information may be vital, it may be accurate, it may be true, it may be impactful, but it will not have any living energy unless you actually apply it.
So I've had a consistent problem about which is me and my friends actually joke about now, where we've had at least one aggressive person come up when we're out and just start trying to cause problems. The fact that it's consistent, it sometimes feels like they're trying to be an asshole and try to start something there. So the fact that it's consistent, I always wanted to ask what I could do different to
Well, okay, so that's interesting because if this is something that's happening consistently to you, where somebody's singling you out for bullying essentially in the environment, this suggests to me that you're giving off some sort of aura that is like punchable or bullyable. Yeah, let's go with this guy. Let's go tool this. Well, yeah, a punch. How do I change the punchable face? Now we're asking the real question. So, no, it's interesting that you mentioned that because, well, for example, there's a couple things that don't really happen to me as much, or very rarely. When I first started, yeah, I'd be going up and trying to ingratiate myself to groups of people, or make myself appear in a favorable light to these groups of people. And what you're doing there, you're triggering conflict because you're trying to with the hierarchy. This is their hierarchy of their social group. This interloper has now come in that's trying to upset the apple cart, and they're like, okay, but you're also probably likely giving off an aura of somebody who is slightly unsure of themselves, right? Because you're probably just when I was just starting, I'm like, okay, what do I do? Oh, let's try this, let's try that. Oh, I hope it works, And so they're like, okay, this person, they're unsure of themselves, so I can with them. I sense that their strength of reality is not rock solid, and I can with them, right? And they will just be a pushover. Or in a similar vein, one thing I always used to get back in the day was buy me a drink. I always used to get. I haven't got that in a decade. Why? Because they're like, I ain't the one. This guy ain't the fucking one to do that. I just don't They can just tell how. The demeanor, the things I'm saying, the way that I just carry myself and shit like that. So I'll just I'll just laugh. I'll be ha, yeah. So anyway, just ignore. I might say something. I don't know. I haven't gotten in a long time, so I don't know. But I'm in terms of what changed. Quite frankly, I think that, I said, it's just being very, very sure of yourself. So I go up, and I also have big sort of rambunctious energy. Do you know what I mean? Like raucous sort of rambunctious energy where it's ha ha ha. And sort of the tonality, the vocal tonality, it's also sort of, I guess what you might call breaking rapport, right? So we used to talk about this. There's different kinds of tonality. There's a a seeking rapport tonality that sort of lilts up at the end. And I know, a question, I notice a lot of people who are just getting into all of this, when they go out and meet people, they're like, hey, how's it going? What are you doing? How's it now? And it kind of lilts up, right? And then there's neutral, where it's just oh, hi, how's it going? Hi, see, I'm trying to do neutral and it even goes breaking rapport. But then there's kind of breaking, hey, good evening. Good evening. Allow me to introduce myself. I'm the next idiot of the night, or whatever, right? Do you believe in Harry Potter? Or whatever, right? So, and just kind of bellowing this nonsense, and it just keeps, it's this fucking endless avalanche, this jazz fucking odyssey of bullshit that just keeps fucking coming, and he believes it 100%. And if you say something to him, he's gonna be like, oh yeah? Da 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 da. Why? Why is he gonna say something? Because I've been doing this for 20 years. Whatever they say to me, I've heard it before. And I have developed retorts to all of these things. You ever heard staircase wit? Voltaire called staircase wit, where you're somebody talks shit, and as you're going up the stairs, you're oh, I should have said this, right? Or have you ever seen that Seinfeld, The Jerk Store? It's a deep cut. Yeah, yeah.
They're running out of you.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. You're their bestseller. Right? Yeah, George does some fucked up shit. So, but basically it's this is what we call invisible threads. Now, if you don't know what invisible threads are, very brief primer on these. It's the idea that in an interaction, oh, now we're going deep here. In an interaction, there's an infinite number of things people could say to you. Infinite number of things, right? Within the confines of the English language, how you can, the permutations of how you can shuffle words around. Hell, you can even get into nonverbals. They can say anything. They could say anything. However, within that infinity, there's a finite range of things that they usually do say. Now, granted, this is an extremely large finite range of things they could say. But if you've done 10,000 interactions with people, you've likely heard most of them. So I know if I say this, they could say anything. But they will probably say this, 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 or this. Okay, they said this. Oh, they said that? Well, guess what? I've got 4 responses teed up to that already. Each one imparting a different emotional tenor to the interaction depending on how I want to take it. And I'll choose that one. So it almost becomes like this branching like dialogue tree. That's obviously a vast oversimplification, but that's sort of essentially what happens. So basically you get this impression like you always have a better answer. And it just seems like you're this dude that's just like this. Wow, this person's like super on the ball. They don't know what the hell is going to come out of your mouth next. They have no idea. So it gets to the point, like when that happens, some guy comes and tries to verbally bully me. He says something, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, but what about this? And they're like, tooled. And they're like, or just like made to look like a fool or made to look like a bully, maybe a slightly self-deprecating, agreeing, and amplify. There's like a variety of different things you can do. Typically, I'll just ignore these people, by the way. And unless they get the attention of the person that I want to speak to, I typically will not even engage. Like literally what I'll do, no matter what they say to me, like if they don't have the attention of the person I care about and they're just chirping some bullshit in my ear, I'll go like this. I'll be like, oh, it's awesome, dude. And then just ignore. And by the way, this needs to be done with a very fucking deft touch. If you just ignore people, they can get angry, right? Because like, especially if alcohol's involved, they're like, oh, this guy's just ignoring me. Right? So, but if I go like, if I go like this, awesome, dude, that will also trigger anger. They're like, oh, this guy's like being this condescending, sarcastic fuck. If I'm like this, it has to be very earnest, okay? It's like, oh, awesome, even that, fuck, that's fuck. It's hard to do. It's hard to do. In the moment, I can do it. Okay, it's like blah blah blah. What's up? That. I'm like, awesome, dude. Awesome, dude. Here he is. When you learn like these invisible threads, like I said, the net effect, it looks like you have a better answer. So if, some of these like randos start chirping at you or whatever, what I personally found is they'll say something and then I'll say something back and they'll be like, oh, that was good. You'll see this like recognition that it was good and they'll be like, well, and they might try to say one other thing, and then I'll be like, oh yeah, well, and they'll be like, and you'll see them kind of go like, okay, I better just stop, because like if I continue this, I'm likely to end up looking stupid, and then they just kind of give it up. Now, look, does that work 100% of the time? No. I'm trying to think. I can't think of like a recent example, but sometimes I get tooled, and I just like lose. But most of the time, you can kind of win those little sort of frame battles. Now, how did I get good at that? Massive amounts of fucking action, right? Like mastery, 10,000 hours. Like in 20 years, this is a conservative estimate. I've probably spoken like to 30,000 people, like strangers that I introduced myself to. Like that's probably a conservative estimate. Now, this invisible threads thing, this appeals to people's logic because like, oh, I can just learn these fucking lines. It just takes 30,000 hours, or whatever. Like, but that's not the most powerful thing. Those are useful, sure, helpful, absolutely, help you navigate certain types of eventualities that might arise and things like that. But what's far, far more powerful is sort of the flip side of that coin, which is a letting go. Like, yes, there's a learning of conventions and stratagems and things like that, but then there's also a letting go, which is what? An allowing of intuitive energies. Okay? What is intuition? No one even fucking knows this, right? Okay, yeah. So it's from a Latin word intuere, which means to look within, to contemplate. And basically, it is the apprehension of knowledge without rational analysis. So I think that intuition really gets discredited a lot because the focus of our educational system is on logic, it's on rationality. But rationality isn't always good, is it? Look at the word rationalization. What is that? That's a pejorative term that we use to describe like faulty guesses or bad actions, right? So one of the big things that I'm always talking about is learning to open to intuitive energies. So up here we've got like universal energy, like chi, life force, whatever you want to call it. Then here we've got your higher observer. Then here we've got intuition. And this is from inner to outer. Emotions, the emotional processes. Intellect or the mind. Face and eye contact. Voice, body. So this right here, the mind often it can act as one of two things. It can be a bridge between the inner and outer, or it can be a barrier. So the problem for most people is a need or a problem or a question will serve as sort of a reconstruction beam, if you will, that takes the interference patterns from the hologram of your subconsciousness, if you will, and produces from an array of a variety of memories and constellations of different memories a suggestion or an impulse of something to say or do in the moment. Again, somebody says something, you're like, this would be a funny joke. It just comes up unbidden. It just wants to come out. But the problem is this, the mind then goes like this, whoa, buddy, let's see some ID. You know, in other words, it must evaluate the impulse for the potential usefulness or danger. Like if I say this, will I look stupid? If I say this, will it look lame? Will it seem ridiculous or pushy or aggressive or whatever? I need to evaluate that before I allow it access to the face, voice, and body. Now, unfortunately, by the time that process has taken place, there's no timeout in the interaction. The people keep talking. And by the time that's happened, either one of two things happens. The moment has passed, and you say it, and it seems it's like the timing's off. It's not as funny as if you said it like just immediately. You give an impression of kind of second guessing yourself and hence being insecure. Or B, more likely, you're like, oh, the moment has passed, and you don't say it at all. And now you have run out of things to say. The intellect has elevated itself to this position of authority over this whole system. It's like, this is all that matters. Intellect is me. This is the boss of all this shit. Unfortunately, your mind very often is not equipped to handle or deal with these energies that it put itself in a position of authority over. So a lot of this is like learning to have the intellect take a back seat and training the intellect to become this useful, like this supportive and useful thing, as opposed to being this fucking judgmental hindrance in your interactions, right? It should serve as a guide towards the external expression. And by the way, the face, the voice, the body all have intuitive understandings of how to express as well, right? Like for example, when I did that just with my hand, I go, intuitive understandings of how to express as well. Like, what the fuck is that? I didn't think that. Okay, now make the hand turn while you say into. It's like, no. It's an intuitive, even the tone colorations I'm putting on the words I'm speaking right now. I'm not predicting these before I say them. It's happening in process. So you have to learn how to relinquish predictive control to gain in process control. And this is a huge problem for a lot of people because they're so accustomed to analyzing everything and looking at the best practice before they take an action. Well, in a human interaction, you do not have all the information. You will never have all the information. You can't arrive at a conclusion that's based on all the information. Look at someone, say, like, you know, a hedge fund manager or somebody who works in, like, that world. They don't have all the information. They can have, like, quants and you know, AIs and things that analyze, but ultimately they're going to have to rely on, yes, rational analysis, but also hunches, guesses, rumors, soft data, and they have to be able to hop back and forth between applied reasoning and best guesses. So the thing is, think of intuition and intellect like two pipes that are feeding into the same faucet. When I'm out there speaking, yes, I do have kind of quips and lines and this flowery language at my disposal and everything, but very often the most powerful things are things that I just found just come out unbidden. It's like it's not, when you allow intuition, it's like you have a feeling of you're not the initiator of the thought, you are the recipient. It's like these ideas are floating around, they choose you to land on, right? And it's this feeling, you'll often surprise yourself when you go out there and you're just like, you just allow it and you say this hilarious thing. It's like a punchline. You know, it's surprising to you. Like, oh, that was awesome. That was fucking awesome. You know, and you feel like you are just the beneficiary of this. There's something very authentic about it. It's like, you know, Keats said what? Beauty is truth, truth, beauty. And this very much applies here. It's this feeling of the completion of an incomplete gestalt, right? Like it's like a puzzle piece fitting in. And so the problem is, though, people don't trust it because we're so trained to like rely on this. Thing is, your mind can only work with information that is consciously available to it at that very moment, right? That's in the cognitive working space, which isn't very big, is it? Like, what's the old saying? You can hold like 7 pieces of information in your mind at once. You know, in this cognitive working space, intuition can work with, it's not magic. It doesn't draw answers out of nothing, but it can work with information that is not consciously available to you. It's a subconscious process that's just as much a part of you as your body or your intellect or your emotions. So if you trust yourself, you have to learn to trust your intuition as well and just allow it. Now here's the thing about this. You might say, well, hell, how do I even do that? You cannot exercise intuition per se. It can't be commanded. It can't be called forth. It can't be like coerced out. It can simply be allowed. So there's 2 things that you can do. Number 1, you can feed it more soft data, right? What does that mean? Basically stay alive longer, go outside more, read, be intellectually curious, have adventures, learn fucking shit, have anecdotes. Like, I've traveled the world so much and that people can come, like I can meet someone from pretty much anywhere and I'll have some fucking anecdote about it. This sort of, again, it's basically like shaking a magic 8 ball. Whatever they say acts as input to the intuition, which is it's going to subconsciously searching through all these different memories that are not, like, it's kind of interesting to think how it does this. We don't know how it works biologically. I mean, hell, we barely even know how, like, our understanding of how the brain actually functions is pretty primitive at this point. Yeah. You know, it's theorized that the brain might be able to hold a quadrillion bits of information. And have you ever heard of a physicist called, or a neuropsychologist called Carl Pribram from Stanford? He came up with this idea, I believe in the 90s, of the holographic brain, right? And the idea was this: we cannot pinpoint where in the brain any like localized information is held from your memory. Like, you can't like cut out a little couple of cells and be like, this is my 8th birthday party. It seems somehow to be distributed throughout the entire unit. Yeah. So, and again, so a hologram is similar in the sense that any small part of the interference pattern generated can be used to recreate the entire image. Now, even going further, there's also theories, if you get into like quantum mechanics and string theory, that our universe is a hologram. And basically what we experience right now, and you know, it's very popular now, this whole multiverse shit in the movies and everything. Well, not just that, do you see the other one with Michelle Yeoh?
No, I have not.
Everything Everywhere All at Once, fucking great movie. Maybe like 15 minutes too long, but fucking amazing. But basically everyone's talking about this shit these days. But essentially, if you've heard of like Bell's theorem, spooky action at a distance, how certain subatomic particles can seem to be entangled with each other somehow over vast distances. They can affect each other in a faster than light way. Like you fuck with this one like in a different galaxy is somehow affected. They suggest that what we experience as reality is simply an unfolding of something that they call pre-space, which is this is a holographic unfolding of potentiality. And so everything is connected. So it's interesting to think that if that, and again, who knows whether this is true or not, what we experience as reality is very subjective, but again, if that is a possibility, it suggests that the entire cosmos is entangled in this way. So maybe we can even reach out to like unconscious, like a collective unconscious that we're unaware of. Carl Jung talked about this. In the Rig Veda, which is a Hindu text, they said, what do they say? Knowledge is structured in consciousness. Plato talked about cosmic forms that there's a whole lot of ancient ideas that speak to this. But I'd say ultimately, if you learn to trust and allow, so again, you can feed it more data, but that's a long process. What you can exercise is the allowing function, right? So what does this mean? Basically, you got to kind of learn to become a blurter. Like whatever the fuck you think, just start saying it. Now again, this doesn't mean that every intuitive impulse should be followed or allowed. And that's where this guy comes in. But it's a bridge. A bridge has guardrails on the side. Okay, it's like let's stay within decorum. One of the biggest epiphanies I ever had, two biggest epiphanies I ever had was, number one, not everyone has to like you. It's fine. You don't like everybody. Why should they like you? Not everyone has to like you. And number two, they're not attracted to the content. People are attracted to the vibe. The content is a vehicle for vibe. The actual verbal meaning of the noises coming out of your flapping meat hole, it serves as a vehicle to convey vibe. That's it. Unless we're in a situation like this where I'm attempting to actually convey information. And by the way, this doesn't mean that I'm just going out, but I'm this like goofy motherfucker. Because you have to be able to have depth as well and get real. One thing I saw, I was in Santa Monica. I was on a program, and I saw this guy, and he went up to these ladies next to me, and he approached them. He introduced himself by singing Lionel Richie, "Hello." He goes, "Hello, is it me you're looking for?" Like not even that good. He's like, "Hello, is it me you're looking for?" And they're like, "Ha ha 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 ha." They thought it was funny. But then he just keeps doing this goofy shit. Hey kid, like he just keeps doing this like fucking wacky shit. And you see their faces go from like to like okay, oh, and they're like, okay, this is like his shtick. Right, oh, this is like his little, oh, and then it turns to like the whole patronizing kind of, oh, well, yeah. They're like, well, hey, it's great to meet you. We gotta go. Have a good night. And then they fucked off, right? Because he couldn't dial off the fucking shtick and just get real. Like, actually, I'm also a real person. I'm not just this fucking cartoon character, like, doing these behaviors. So, like, Krusty the Clown. So there's gotta be a certain depth. I'd say that the cartoon character antics, if I go up and I'll put on some weird like cartoon pimp voice or do some weird shit or like say some obnoxious outlandish things, like that can be useful for like getting attention. It can be good for like if someone else comes in, getting attention back. It can be good for like moving energy, like whether that's physically or emotionally. It can be good for certain things, but you got to learn, again, like we talked about before, you got to find the right blend where it's like fun, but also there's a real person here. And it's not just this like cartoon character cutout who's like putting on a shtick because they feel they're not enough. You know what I mean? So the thing is, like, that used to be called the dancing monkey syndrome, right? Like, hey, do you like me? So now I'm like, be your own monkey. This monkey dances for himself. Pole dances for himself. Yeah. So But back to the intuition thing, I think that like that is literally the flip side of the coin in terms of, yeah, you need to learn certain things to move the interaction forward, but you also need to learn to let go. And man, honestly, like I said, I think that intuition has been discredited a lot in our educational system. And I think that going forward for humanity, we should put more of an emphasis on that. You know, because the world is becoming more and more complex with problems that are becoming so complex that we have to kind of just guess as to what to do with it. You know, financial markets, global catastrophe, climate change, things of this nature. Okay, well, this probably do this. Maybe this will work. You know, not understanding all the like, yes, AI and computers might be able to help us with that, but going forward, you know, humans are going to have to guide those creations, and they're going to have to make intuitive guesses with the best, you know, knowledge they have.